Chapter 10 The Hunter. It took precisely 8 minutes and 20 seconds for the hunter and his pack to arrive at the Riverside Amenity rubbish dump after Sally had waved Muriel off at the quay. Sally had lived through each one of those 500 seconds with a mounting dread in the pit of her stomach. What had she done? Sally had said nothing when she returned to the cafe, but something about her demeanor had caused most of her customers to quickly drink up their Springo, gulp down the last crumbs of barley cake, and melt speedily into the night. The only customers Sally had left were the 5 northern traders who were on their second measures of Springo Special and were talking softly among themselves in their mournful sing-song accents. Even the washing-up boy had disappeared. Sally's mouth was dry, her hands were shaking, and she fought against her overwhelming desire to run away. Calm down, girl, she told herself. Tough it out. Deny everything. The hunter has no reason to suspect you. If you run now, he'll know you're involved, and the hunter will find you. He always does. Just sit tight and keep cool. The second hand of the big cafe clock ticked on. Click, click, click. 498 seconds. 499 seconds. 500. A powerful searchlight beam swept across the top of the rubbish dump. Sally ran to a nearby window and stared out, her heart pounding. She could see a swarm of black figures milling around, silhouetted in the beam of the searchlight. The hunter had brought his pack, just as Marcia had warned. Sally stared intently, trying to make out what they were doing. The pack was gathered around the rat door, which Marcia had jammed shut with the lock, fast, and weld spell. To Sally's relief, the pack seemed to be in no hurry. In fact, looked as though they were laughing among themselves. Some faint shouts drifted down to the cafe. Sally strained to hear her ears. What she heard made her shiver. Wizard scum. Rats trapped by a rat door. Don't go away, ha-ha, we're coming to get you. As Sally watched, she could see the figures around the rat door becoming increasingly frantic as the door held fast against all their efforts to pull it free. Standing apart from the pack was a lone figure, watching impatiently, whom Sally rightfully took to be the hunter. Suddenly the hunter lost patience with the efforts to free the rat door. He strode over, grabbed an axe from one of the pack, and angrily attacked the door. Loud metallic clangs echoed down to the cafe until eventually the mangled rat door was tossed to the side, and one of the pack was sent into the chute to dig out the rubbish. A searchlight was now trained directly into the chute, and the pack gathered around the exit. Sally could see the glinting of their pistols in the glare of the lights. With her heart in her mouth, Sally waited for them to discover that their prey had fled. It didn't take long. A devilish figure emerged from the chute and was roughly grabbed by the hunter, who Sally could tell was furious. He shook the man violently and threw him aside, sending him sprawling down the slope of the dump. The hunter crouched down and peered disbelievingly into the empty rubbish chute. Abruptly, he motioned for the smallest of the pack to go into the chute. The man chosen hung back reluctantly, but he was forced in, and 2 pack guards with pistols were there, left at the entrance. The hunter walked slowly to the edge of the rubbish dump to regain his composure after finding that his prey had eluded him. He was followed at a safe distance by the small figure of a boy. The boy was dressed in the everyday green robes of a wizard apprentice, but unlike any apprentice, he wore around his waist a red sash with 3 black stars emblazoned on it, the stars of Dom Daniel. But at that moment, the hunter was unaware of Dom Daniel's apprentice. He stood quietly, a short, solidly built man with the usual cropped guard haircut. His face was brown and lined from all his years outdoors spent hunting and tracking down prey of the human kind. He wore the usual hunter attire, dark green tunic and short cloak with thick brown leather boots. Around his waist was a broad leather belt from which hung a sheathed knife and a pouch. The hunter smiled a grim smile, his mouth a thin, determined line turned down at the edges. His pale blue eyes narrowed to a watchful slit. So, it was to be a hunt, was it? Very well, there was nothing he liked better than a hunt. For years he had been slowly making his way up through the ranks of the hunting pack, and at last he had reached his goal. He was a hunter, the very best of the pack, and this was the moment he had been waiting for. Here he was, hunting not only the extraordinary wizard, but also the princess, the queenling no less. The hunter felt excited as he anticipated a night to remember. The sighting, the trail, the chase, the close, and the kill. No problem, thought the hunter, his smile broadening to show his small pointed teeth in the cold moonlight. The hunter turned his thoughts to the hunt. Something told him that the birds had flown from the rubbish chute, but as an efficient hunter, he had to make sure that all possibilities were covered, and the pack guard he had sent inside had been given instructions to follow the chute and check all exits back up to the wizard tower. The fact that was probably impossible did not trouble the hunter. A pack guard was the lowest of the low, and expendable, and would do his duty or die in the attempt. The hunter had been an expendable once, but not for long. He'd made sure of that. And now he thought, with a tremor of excitement, now he must find the trail. The rubbish dump, however, yielded few clues, even to the skilled tracker that the hunter was. The heat from the decay of the rubbish had melted the snow, and the constant disturbance of the rubbish by rats and gulls had already removed any trace of a trail. Very well, thought the hunter. In the absence of a trail, he must search out a sighting. The hunter stood on his vantage point on top of the dump and surveyed the moonlight scene through his narrowed eyes. Behind him rose the steep, dark walls of the castle, the battlements outlined crisply against the cold, bright, starry sky. In front of him lay the undulating landscape of the rich farmland that bordered the far side of the river, and in the distance, on the horizon, his eyes took in the jagged spine of the border mountains. The hunter gave the snow-covered landscape a long, considered stare, but saw nothing of interest to him. He then turned his attention to the more immediate scene below him. He looked down at a broad sweep of the river, his gaze following the flow of the river water as it rounded the bend and flowed swiftly on his right, past the cafe perched on the pontoon, which was floating gently on the high tide, past the little quay with its boats moored up for the night, and on down the broad sweep of the river until it disappeared from view behind Raven's Rock, a jagged outcrop that towered over the river. The hunter listened intently for sounds rising up from the water, but all he heard was the silence and the blanketing of snow brings. He scanned the water for clues, perhaps a shadow under the banks, a startled bird, a telltale ripple, but he could see nothing. Nothing. It was strangely quiet and still, the dark river silently winding through the bright, snowy landscape, lit by the shimmer of the full moon. It was, thought the hunter, a perfect night for a hunt. The hunter stood immobile, tense, waiting for the sighting to show itself to him, watching and waiting. Something caught his eye, a white face at the window of a cafe, a frightened face, a face that knew something. The hunter smiled. He had a sighting. He was back on the trail.